The 5 most dangerous and evil women in the Bible. The Bible is filled with accounts of women who acted in opposition to God's commandments, committing acts of sin and rebellion. While there are many, few were as truly evil and dangerous as the women you'll encounter in this video. These women did not just break God's laws, they perpetrated some of the most horrific acts against the innocent, the vulnerable, and even the people of God. Each of them left a legacy of destruction, deceit, and manipulation. Without further delay, let's dive into the lives of these women, starting from the least to the most dangerous and evil. Number 5. Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife lived in ancient Egypt during a time when Joseph, the son of Jacob, had been sold into slavery by his envious brothers. Joseph, a young man of great integrity and wisdom, was purchased by Potiphar, a high-ranking officer in Pharaoh's court, who served as the captain of the guard. Because of Joseph's strong moral character and the divine favor upon him, Potiphar entrusted him with the management of his household. But Potiphar's wife soon became infatuated with Joseph. Driven by lust, boredom, or perhaps a desire for control, she relentlessly pursued him. She began making advances, hoping to seduce him and have him commit adultery with her. This is clearly illustrated in the Bible, specifically in Genesis 39:7-10. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept anything back from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. Joseph, determined to honor both Potiphar and God, rejected her attempts. Yet Potiphar's wife was relentless. Her passion for Joseph turned into frustration, and she began to plot. One day, when the household was empty, she seized him, demanding that he lie with her. Joseph, in a desperate attempt to escape, fled from her grasp, leaving behind his cloak. Humiliated and angry, Potiphar's wife sought revenge. She falsely accused Joseph of attempting to assault her, using the cloak as supposed evidence of his guilt. This manipulation, rooted in her own dishonor, led to dire consequences for Joseph. His master, Potiphar, believed his wife's lie and, despite Joseph's innocence, ordered him to be thrown into prison. The Bible records this in Genesis 39:19-20. As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, "This is the way your servant treated me," his anger was kindled, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there, in prison. Potiphar's wife, in her wickedness, thought she had ruined Joseph's life. But her deceitful actions ended up setting the stage for a much greater divine plan. In prison, Joseph's faithfulness to God never wavered, and God remained with him. Joseph's integrity and administrative skills were noticed by the prison warden, who placed him in charge of the other prisoners. Genesis 39:21-23 describes this favor. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. This period in prison became pivotal in Joseph's life. While there, Joseph interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker, which eventually led him to interpret Pharaoh's own dreams. As a result, Joseph rose to power, becoming the second most powerful man in Egypt. He oversaw preparations for the famine that would soon strike the land, a task that required divine wisdom. In the end, Potiphar's wife may have thought her lies and deceptions had destroyed Joseph, but instead, they were part of God's greater plan. Joseph emerged from his trials, not only free, but also in a position of tremendous power, and he was eventually able to save his own family, and even Egypt, from famine. His rise to power is detailed in Genesis 41, where Joseph, through God's guidance, interprets Pharaoh's dreams and is appointed as the ruler over Egypt. Potiphar's wife left a legacy of evil, driven by lust, deceit, and jealousy. Her actions were not only malicious, but they also had far-reaching consequences, not just for Joseph, but for everyone around her. She represents a warning against the destructive power of false accusations, manipulation, and unrepentant sin. Unwittingly, Potiphar's wife set the stage for Joseph's rise to power and the salvation of many, including her own family, during the devastating famine. While there is no record of her facing direct punishment, God's divine plan unfolded, showing that even the most malicious actions can be turned into opportunities for His greater purpose and glory. Though Potiphar's wife may not have faced immediate consequences, her actions have had lasting repercussions as her false accusations continue to influence discussions about betrayal and injustice even today. Number 4. Delilah. Many people commit evil, but fewer truly revel in it. Delilah was one of those who not only participated in wickedness, but thrived in it. Her story takes place during the tumultuous period of the Judges, a time when Israel faced constant struggles with neighboring nations, including the Philistines. Delilah lived in the valley of Sorek, a region heavily associated with the Philistines, who were sworn enemies of Israel. Although her exact nationality is not specified in the Bible, her actions clearly align her with the Philistine leaders against Israel. Delilah is infamous for her role in the downfall of Samson, one of Israel's most renowned judges, celebrated for his supernatural strength. The Philistine rulers, desperate to defeat Samson, saw Delilah as their golden opportunity. They bribed her with a considerable amount of silver, offering her a fortune in exchange for discovering the secret of Samson's strength. Judges 16:5. Driven by greed and ambition, Delilah agreed to their plan. Delilah's manipulation of Samson was relentless. She persistently nagged him, trying to uncover the source of his strength. Despite several attempts, Samson continued to deceive her with false answers. But Delilah's persistence wore him down, and eventually, he revealed the truth to her. Judges 16:16-17 describes this moment. And when she pressed him hard with her words day after day, and urged him, his soul was vexed to death. And he told her all his heart, and said to her, "A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man." After learning the truth, Delilah took advantage of Samson's vulnerability. She lulled him to sleep on her lap, then called for a man to shave off the 7 locks of his hair, thus robbing him of the strength God had bestowed upon him. Samson, the once mighty judge, was betrayed by the very person he trusted. Once his hair was shaved, he lost his supernatural strength. The Philistines seized this opportunity to capture him, gouged out his eyes, and imprisoned him in Gaza, forcing him to grind grain in a mill. a humiliating fate for someone once considered invincible. Judges 16:21. Delilah was generously rewarded for her betrayal. The Bible notes that each of the Philistine leaders gave her a substantial bribe, 1,100 pieces of silver from each leader. Judges 16:5. This enormous sum reflects the value they placed on capturing Samson and their willingness to go to any lengths to subdue him. While Delilah's immediate fate after these events is not detailed, her actions had a profound and lasting impact on both Samson and the Philistines. During his captivity, Samson's hair began to grow back, symbolizing the gradual return of his strength. In a moment of desperation, Samson prayed to God to restore his strength one final time. God, in his mercy, answered Samson's prayer. At a Philistine celebration in the temple of Dagon, Samson pushed apart the two central pillars of the temple, causing it to collapse, killing not only Samson, but many Philistines as well. Judges 16:28-30. This final act of revenge and redemption avenged his suffering and struck a blow to the Philistine leadership. Although Delilah is not mentioned again in the aftermath of Samson's death, her role in his downfall remains significant. Her betrayal highlights themes of deceit, manipulation, and the dire consequences of siding against God's chosen people. Delilah's actions serve as a warning about the destructive power of greed and the consequences of using deceit for personal gain. Her treachery led to the suffering of Samson, but ultimately contributed to the downfall of the very people who sought to exploit her. Sadly, Delilah's legacy of evil continues to echo through history. Her actions left a lasting imprint on the world, one that still serves as a cautionary tale about betrayal, greed, and manipulation. Number 3. Herodias. Herodias' story is one of the most tragic and heartbreaking in the Bible. A prominent member of the Herodian dynasty, a ruling family in Judea, known for its intermarriages to consolidate power. Herodias was initially married to Herod Philip, her half-uncle. However, she left him and married his half-brother, Herod Antipas, the Tetrarch of Galilee and Perea. This marriage was not only politically motivated, but also personally driven, and it sparked a series of tragic events. Herodias' story is filled with drama and betrayal. Her marriage to Herod Antipas led to the eventual beheading of John the Baptist, a key figure in the New Testament. John had openly condemned the marriage as unlawful, as it violated Jewish law, leading to Herodias' deep resentment towards him. She sought revenge, and in a moment of opportunity, her daughter Salome danced for Herod Antipas and his guests, prompting him to promise her anything she wanted. At the urging of Herodias, Salome requested the head of John the Baptist on a platter, a cruel and heartless demand. Herod, though troubled, reluctantly agreed. John the Baptist was beheaded in prison, and his head was delivered to Herodias. This act of vengeance marked the tragic end of a righteous prophet's life and revealed the lengths to which Herodias would go to satisfy her desire for power and revenge. Herodias' actions are a powerful reminder of the consequences of vengeance and unchecked ambition. Her desire for power and her bitter hatred for John the Baptist ultimately led to her role in one of the Bible's most tragic events. Her legacy, like that of Delilah and Potiphar's wife, serves as a reminder that evil actions often lead to destruction, not only for those who are wrong, but also for those who perpetrate the evil. The story of Herodias is highly controversial. It involves her divorcing her first husband and marrying his brother, which was considered unlawful by Jewish standards at the time. Herodias is notorious not only for this marriage, but also for her deep grudge against John the Baptist, a prophet revered by many for his fearless proclamation of God's truth. John the Baptist publicly denounced her marriage to Herod Antipas, declaring it unlawful, according to Jewish law, Mark 6:18-19. This condemnation deeply angered Herodias, and she was determined to take revenge. Her chance came during the birthday celebration of Herod Antipas. At this party, Herodias manipulated her daughter, Salome, into performing a provocative dance that greatly pleased Herod and his guests. Herod, overcome with pleasure and in a moment of arrogance, promised to grant Salome anything she desired, even offering up to half his kingdom. Mark 6:22-23. Prompted by her mother's vengeful desire, Salome asked for something chilling: the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Mark 6:24-25. Herod, though deeply distressed by this request due to his respect for John, felt compelled to honor his oath made in front of his guests. Reluctantly, he ordered John's immediate execution. Mark 6:26-27. John, known for his ascetic lifestyle and unwavering dedication to the truth of God's word, became the tragic victim of Herodias' scheme. He was beheaded in prison, and his severed head was brought to Salome on a platter, who then gave it to her mother, Herodias. Mark 6:27-28. This gruesome act silenced the prophet, but it also revealed the ruthless, vindictive nature of Herodias. While the Bible does not mention any immediate consequences for Herodias' actions, her life was far from peaceful. Her husband, Herod Antipas, eventually faced political downfall. The Roman Emperor Caligula exiled him to Gaul, modern-day France, after accusations of conspiracy and disloyalty. This exile marked the end of Herod Antipas's political power and influence. However, the Bible does not detail what happened to Herodias after this event. What we do know is that her legacy was one of infamy. Her actions left a lasting impression as a symbol of treachery and ruthless vengeance. Herodias' story serves as a sobering reminder of the destructive power of unchecked anger and the lengths to which hatred and desire for revenge can drive a person. Her manipulative behavior, particularly in her use of her daughter to execute her vengeful plot against a righteous man, paints a vivid picture of the destructive effects of power when used for selfish gain. Her actions and the eventual death of John the Baptist underline significant themes of manipulation, betrayal, and the inevitable consequences of unrighteous behavior. Though the Bible does not chronicle Herodias' final days, her story remains one of warning. It serves as a profound illustration of how the pursuit of vengeance and the abuse of power can lead to moral decay and spiritual downfall. Number 2. Athaliah. Athaliah was the daughter of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel of Israel, a lineage infamous for its commitment to idolatry and ruthless rule. Her marriage to Jehoram, the king of Judah, was a political alliance designed to strengthen the relationship between Israel and Judah. After her husband's death and her son Ahaziah's brief reign as king, Athaliah's desire for power became increasingly clear. Following her son's death, Athaliah sought to secure her position as the most powerful ruler in Judah. In a brutal act of treachery, she ordered the massacre of all potential heirs to the throne, ensuring that no one from the royal family would threaten her rule. Many innocent people were killed in this gruesome purge. Her actions, marked by bloodshed and ambition, were meant to eliminate any challenge to her authority and cement her control over the kingdom. The Bible details this horrific event in 2 Kings 11:1-3, where it says, "When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal family. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram and sister of Ahaziah, took Joash the son of Ahaziah and stole him away from among the king's sons who were being put to death. She put him and his nurse in a bedroom. Thus, they hid him from Athaliah, so that he was not put to death, and he remained hidden with them for 6 years. This was a crucial turning point in the biblical narrative, as Jehosheba's act of bravery saved Joash, the only surviving heir to the throne. Despite Athaliah's ruthless actions, she could not extinguish the royal bloodline. Athaliah's reign was marked by violence, deception, and manipulation. Her power, gained through bloodshed, was ultimately fragile, as her own reign was short-lived. In the end, her schemes came to an end, and her life stands as a warning about the destructive consequences of tyranny and the thirst for power. Her story, much like that of Herodias, is a cautionary tale of how unchecked ambition and a disregard for justice can lead to violent and devastating outcomes. Athaliah's legacy is one of fear and bloodshed, serving as a reminder of the dangers of ruling with cruelty and violence. The stories of Herodias and Athaliah are stark reminders of the consequences of seeking power at any cost. Both women used manipulation, violence, and treachery to achieve their goals, but their legacies are marred by their ruthless actions. These stories invite us to reflect on the destructive nature of unchecked anger, the pursuit of vengeance, and the abuse of power. Let us consider the lessons these stories teach us about integrity, righteousness, and the consequences of living outside of God's will. For 6 years, Joash, the rightful heir to the throne, remained hidden in the house of the Lord, sheltered from the wrath of Athaliah, who ruled Judah with an iron fist. This was all unknown to Athaliah, who, in her relentless pursuit of power, had no idea that her own grandson, Joash, had been saved by his aunt, Jehosheba. She hid him away in the temple of the Lord, ensuring that the Davidic line, which Athaliah sought to obliterate, would not be lost. This brave and selfless act of protection prevented the annihilation of Judah's royal family. Athaliah's ambition to rule had no boundaries, and her ruthlessness knew no limits. She didn't just threaten others. She eliminated anyone who might pose a challenge to her claim to the throne, even if they were family. Her cruel reign targeted her own grandchildren and other potential heirs, anyone with even a remote connection to the royal bloodline. The extent of Athaliah's bloodshed was staggering. Her slaughter of innocents highlighted her merciless hunger for power, her utter disregard for familial bonds, and her indifference to any sense of moral decency. For 6 long years, she ruled Judah with a heart of stone, continuing the idolatrous practices she inherited from her parents, King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. Her reign brought Judah to its knees, both spiritually and morally, as she promoted pagan worship and sought to extinguish any trace of devotion to the true God. But the cruelty of Athaliah would eventually provoke a response from those loyal to the true royal lineage. In a bold and carefully orchestrated plan, the high priest Jehoiada led a coup to dethrone Athaliah and restore Judah's rightful leadership. He secretly gathered military leaders and temple guards to support the rebellion. As the years passed, Joash, the rightful king, grew older. When he turned 7, Jehoiada revealed him to the people as the true heir to the throne. The people of Judah, weary from Athaliah's tyranny, rallied behind the young Joash. The dramatic scene that unfolded in the temple is recorded in 2 Kings 11:12-16, and it describes the moment when Joash was crowned king. Jehoiada brought the boy out in front of the people, placed the crown on his head, and presented him with the testimony. The people proclaimed Joash as king, anointing him and rejoicing, shouting, "Long live the king!" When Athaliah heard the noise from the guard and the excited crowd, she rushed into the temple to confront what was happening. Upon seeing Joash standing by the pillar, surrounded by military leaders and trumpeters, with the people cheering, she immediately tore her clothes in despair and cried out, "Treason! Treason!" In response to her cries, Jehoiada gave a clear order: "Bring her out between the ranks and put to death with the sword anyone who follows her." Jehoiada knew that her wicked reign could not go unchallenged. He further commanded that Athaliah not be executed in the temple, a place of holiness. Instead, they led her through the horses' entrance and into the royal palace, where she was put to death. With Athaliah's death, her brutal reign came to a sudden and decisive end. The influence of her family over Judah was broken. The rightful Davidic line was restored through Joash, who became king, symbolizing the revival of a godly kingship in Judah. Athaliah's life and reign serve as a chilling reminder of the corrupting influence of power and the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition. Her death marked the restoration of peace and righteousness. The people of Judah, under the leadership of Jehoiada, turned back to the Lord, returning to the worship of Yahweh. Joash began his reign as a young king, symbolizing hope and renewal for the people. He was the light that Judah desperately needed, a sign of the triumph of divine justice over tyranny. Number 1. Jezebel. If you think Athaliah was brutal, wait until you hear about Jezebel. Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, was not just a queen. She was a force of evil. Her father was both a monarch and a high priest of Astarte, a pagan goddess. And through this lineage, Jezebel brought a wave of idolatry and corruption to Israel. Her marriage to Ahab, the king of Israel, was not just for love. It was a political alliance that strengthened her influence and allowed her to bring with her the worship of Baal into Israel. Jezebel was a fervent worshiper of Baal, a Canaanite deity, and she did everything in her power to promote Baal worship across the nation. Her actions were nothing short of catastrophic for Israel, leading the people away from the worship of Yahweh and into deep idolatry. Jezebel's wickedness knew no bounds. She didn't just privately worship Baal. She aggressively worked to replace Yahweh worship with Baal worship throughout the land. She ordered the construction of altars and temples dedicated to Baal and Asherah, encouraging the people of Israel to forsake their covenant with God. Jezebel's influence on King Ahab was profound. Together, they spread the worship of false gods and initiated a spiritual decline in Israel that lasted for generations. Jezebel's reign over Israel was marked by cruelty, manipulation, and spiritual decay. Her legacy is one of devastation. Her insatiable desire for power led her to orchestrate the killing of prophets of Yahweh and the silencing of any opposition to her plans. As a result, she became the embodiment of spiritual corruption, an example of how unchecked power and devotion to false gods can destroy a nation. In the end, Jezebel's reign was brought to an end in a dramatic and violent fashion, but her actions left a deep and lasting impact on Israel. Her life serves as a warning to all about the dangers of idolatry, the abuse of power, and the consequences of turning away from the one true God. The story of Jezebel is one of extreme wickedness and betrayal. As a queen of Israel, she led the nation into great sin by turning the people away from Yahweh, resulting in widespread idolatry. Her influence was not only spiritual, but also political. Jezebel sought to consolidate her power by aligning Israel's religious practices with those of her homeland. introducing the worship of Baal and other false gods. This manipulation of both religion and politics marked her reign with cruelty and deceit. One of Jezebel's most infamous acts was the murder of Naboth, a righteous man who owned a vineyard that her husband, King Ahab, desired. When Naboth refused to sell his vineyard, Jezebel devised a sinister plan. She forged letters in Ahab's name and instructed the elders and nobles of Naboth's city to falsely accuse him of blasphemy and treason. These false accusations led to Naboth being stoned to death. With his death, Ahab seized the vineyard. This act of manipulation and murder demonstrated Jezebel's ruthless character and her willingness to do whatever it took to achieve her desires, even if it meant taking innocent lives. In the midst of her reign of terror, there was one man who dared to stand against her: Elijah. Elijah was a prophet of Yahweh, and after his dramatic victory over the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, Jezebel's wrath reached its peak. On Mount Carmel, Elijah had called upon the power of Yahweh, proving his superiority over the false gods of Baal by calling down fire from heaven to consume the sacrifice. This incredible act of divine power led to the execution of the false prophets. However, Jezebel, filled with rage and hatred, vowed to kill Elijah in retaliation. Elijah, fearing for his life, fled into the wilderness. Jezebel's relentless pursuit of Elijah and her determination to eliminate all those who remained faithful to Yahweh revealed the depth of her hatred for the prophets of God. She ordered the massacre of many faithful servants of Yahweh, creating a climate of fear and oppression across Israel. Those who remained loyal to God had to hide in secret, and many were forced into hiding to protect themselves from her wrath. Obadiah, a servant of the Lord, took it upon himself to hide 100 prophets in caves, ensuring their survival. Jezebel's reign of terror seemed unending, but her evil deeds did not go unpunished. God had already declared through Elijah that her death would be a divine judgment for her wickedness. Elijah prophesied that Jezebel would meet a gruesome end, and that dogs would devour her body by the walls of Jezreel. This prophecy was a clear indication of the severity of her crimes and the inevitable retribution she would face. Jezebel's fate was sealed when Jehu, a commander anointed by the prophet Elisha, came to Jezreel to carry out God's judgment. When Jezebel heard that Jehu was coming, she attempted to act defiantly, adorning herself and taunting him from a window. But Jehu, with no fear, ordered her to be thrown from the window. She fell to her death, and her body was trampled by horses. Her remains were left exposed, and dogs came to eat her flesh, leaving nothing but her skull, feet, and hands. This gruesome end fulfilled Elijah's prophecy in a vivid and horrifying way. The story of Jezebel is a chilling reminder of the destructive power of sin and the inevitability of divine justice. Her legacy is one of profound wickedness and idolatry, and her name became synonymous with treachery, deceit, and immorality. She serves as a cautionary tale of the consequences of leading others away from God. Her story shows how a person's ambition and thirst for power, unchecked by moral integrity, can lead to devastation and destruction, not only for themselves, but for others as well. In conclusion, the stories of Jezebel and others like her serve as powerful warnings about the dangers of unchecked ambition, deceit, and idolatry. Each of their stories illustrates the severe consequences of straying from moral integrity and faithfulness to God. Let us learn from their tragic lives and strive to seek righteousness, integrity, and devotion to God. By cultivating humility, integrity, and faithfulness, we can avoid the destructive paths these women took. Their lives serve as stark reminders of the consequences of straying from God's commandments. At the same time, they highlight the virtues of love, justice, and faith. Rather than following the destructive ways of those who rebelled against God, let us strive to live lives that honor God and promote goodness. When we walk in the path of righteousness, we will experience a life of fulfillment, peace, and divine favor. The lessons from Jezebel's life are sobering, but they offer us an opportunity to reflect and make choices that align with God's will. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video. May God bless you abundantly as you walk in His ways. Amen.
Do you love meaningful Bible stories? Top 7 Bible Stories channel will bring you inspiration and peace every day. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments section. Your sharing is the motivation for us to bring more stories. Top 7 Bible Stories. Good stories, beautiful meanings.